Good afternoon. Happy Saturday. Chile expressed great concern over Press with Rancor getting charged with a felony, not a misdemeanor, a felony, and couldn't understand it. So I'm here to help you understand it. The video starts at 2:40. I'm not worried about copyright. It's a 5-minute long clip and I don't want to play it. You can play it at your leisure. I'm not worried about copyright because this is a police video. This isn't something that Press with Rancor himself filmed. So it is certainly not his copyrighted material. Again, 5 minutes. In it, though, some things of note. The officer tells him for about 5 minutes to get back. Press with Rancor does not comply. The officer asks him multiple times if he understands. Press with Rancor repeats it back to him and then still doesn't comply. That's not a very bright thing to do. You can't really say that you didn't understand or you didn't hear the order if you've literally repeated it back to the officer. He says, Press with Rancor says multiple times that interference and or obstruction is a physical act. It is not necessarily a physical act. It can also be the failure to physically act. And then finally, Press with Rancor talks about prior restraint. Prior restraint is once again saying that someone can't say something about something. Like Kate can't talk about Chile. If the court said that, then that would be presumptively unconstitutional because that would be subject to strict scrutiny. There would have to be a compelling state interest, and the restriction would have to be narrowly tailored. So narrowly tailored that it is in fact the least restrictive alternative. And it's that narrow tailoring where they always fall apart. So that's what prior restraint is. You may remember from every court that's dealt with it, all the way from Glick to Turner to Fordyce. I mean, every court that has dealt with it has said that you can film the police, quote, subject to reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions, end quote. And a reasonable place restriction would likely be you have to go 20 feet back that way to give us room so that we feel safe. Now, I am not a huge fan of officers having to be comfy, cozy, and tucked in bed kind of safe. There is a certain amount of danger inherent with being a police officer. They sign up knowing it's there. I don't particularly think that they are entitled to they should be entitled to any special consideration. After all, they're the ones wearing body armor. They're the ones who have multiple weapons on them. They're the ones who can pull those weapons without facing any ramification. I mean, if you walk up with a drawn firearm, a police officer is going to pull his firearm and shoot you. But if a police officer walks up with a drawn firearm, you can't draw your firearm and shoot the police officer. Generally speaking, hashtag ask a local attorney. So I'm not a huge fan of officer safety. But anyway, that's the summation of the 5 minutes. And I hope I didn't take 5 minutes explaining it. So the question becomes, what in fact can he or was he charged with? He was charged with a violation of 750.81D. This is a Michigan statute from the Michigan Penal Code. The Michigan legislature wrote this and they passed it and it went to the governor who signed it into law. This has been around for a long, long time with modifications. I don't think it's going anywhere. And it says, except as provided in subsections 2, 3, and 4, which we're not interested in, they don't apply. An individual who assaults, batters, let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger for you, who assaults, batters, wounds, resists, obstructs, opposes, or endangers a person who the individual knows or has reason to know is performing his or her duties is guilty of a felony punishable by imprisonment for not more than 2 years or a fine of not more than $2,000 or both. And person is defined to include a police officer. So basically this this deals with police officers and firefighters and ambulance drivers, I think. Certain ambulance drivers, yeah. So the question becomes, did Press with Rancor obstruct the police? And I think Press with Rancor's understanding that obstructing the police requires some sort of physical act comes from People versus Morris. And People versus Morris doesn't say that it requires a physical act. And I'm being generous to him because I looked for interference requires a physical act or obstruction requires a physical act, and I don't see that language anywhere. But just using words, like merely to voice one's objection to an officer's belief as to who the guilty party does not amount to a prescribed act under the statute. So saying like she did it or she didn't do it, whatever, is not obstruction. Telling the officer no is not obstruction. Telling the officer no and not complying is obstruction. So that's the big deal. And they've looked at this one, People versus Morris. They looked at the prior. It used to be under Valdez in when was Valdez? In 2001. They looked at the language in two statutes. They looked at the language in 750.49 or something like that. 479, 750.479. And it was the same language at the time in 750.81 D1. It was the same language. And the Valdez court defined oppose as meaning to act against or furnish resistance to combat. But then a year after Vasquez, the legislature redefined the term. They added a definition. They added this to the statute. Obstruct includes, so it includes either the use or threatened use of physical interference or force, or, so either that or a knowing failure to comply with a lawful command. They added that. So failing to comply with the officer's command to go back to his vehicle and film from there, that's what the problem is. It's not that he was filming, it's the location where he was. Now, this was an interesting one. This is an unpublished opinion from the Michigan Court of Appeals. Jennings was the passenger. He declined to obey the police officer's orders to stay in the vehicle. Yes, they can order you to stay in the vehicle. It says it up in here. Where did it say it? Where did it say it? Here we go. Here, Jenny asserts he has a constitutional right to record the police, and he suggests that Schaefer's order to get back in the vehicle infringed on that right, so the command was not lawful. Generally, however, police may lawfully command a passenger to stay in a vehicle in order to maintain control over the scene. Citation. Finding the officer's commands to a passenger to stay in the vehicle to be lawful. They discern no meaningful distinction between a command for a passenger to stay in a vehicle and a command to return to the vehicle. There you go. So, additionally, as explained by the United States Court of Appeals, because he wanted to film the police for the First Circuit, Michigan's Sixth Circuit, I believe. Sixth Circuit or Seventh Circuit? Sixth or Seventh Circuit. I don't know. I'll say sixth for shits and grins. Why not? It's like sixth or seventh, though. As explained by the United States Court of Appeals for the First Circuit, though, there is a constitutional right to film government officials engaged in their duties in a public place, including officers performing their responsibilities, and that right is not unlimited, and it may be subject to reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions. The side of a highway is a public place, and so reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions. That doesn't mean the side of a highway is necessarily a traditional public forum. I disagree that like a freeway or a highway is a traditional public forum, even though roads, sidewalks, or streets and sidewalks and parks, streets has a different connotation than a highway. Street, sidewalks, and parks, streets are things that like people walk along the side of the street, so, or maybe they have to walk in the street from time to time. Like old town Sacramento, like there's not a lot of traffic and there's a lot of people walking in the streets because they're cobble streets and it's like a touristy area. So that would probably be, those streets would probably be a traditional public forum. Interstate 5, which goes right through old Sacramento, well, above it kinda, is probably not a traditional public forum because pedestrians aren't allowed there and they've never been allowed to be up there and to have free speech up there. Thus, having a cellular phone and recording or attempting to record the police does not automatically give an individual carte blanche to ignore police commands aimed at securing or maintaining scene safety. That's pretty good right there. And then citations. So this is solid advice. This is solid advice. Generally speaking, just because you're recording, just because you're filming, just because you're videoing, whatever, that doesn't allow you to commit other crimes. Like you can't trespass just because you're holding a camera. You can't obstruct the police just because you're holding a camera. You can't assault someone just because you're holding a camera. Cameras don't give you superpowers. Despite what Chile might want you to believe, cameras don't give you superpowers. So it appears to me, I have nothing against Press with Rancor. I don't subscribe to him. I never have. He doesn't seem very intelligent. He doesn't understand what prior restraint is. But I mean, there's a lot of auditors out there who don't understand, and he may one day, through ignorance, but nonetheless persistence, he might someday get good case law put on the books. You never know. But in this particular instance, I don't see any issue with the arrest. He didn't know what he could do and he couldn't do, and he thought he had superpowers because of the camera. He thinks he understands the law that he doesn't, and it's going to bite him in the ass. And, it might come to a point where the prosecution drops it because they just don't want to deal with it or whatever. But I don't particularly see, especially considering he literally stated back to the police officer what the police officer was ordering him to do. That really indicates he freaking knew damn well what he was supposed to do. I don't see this going to trial and Mr. Rancor succeeding. Anyway, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.